Alrighty, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. I'll give folks just a couple more minutes to file in. We're expecting kind of a big crowd today, so we'll probably kick things off here in a minute or so after folks get logged in. Thanks for being with us today. Alrighty. So thanks everyone for joining today. Like I mentioned, we're really excited for today's webinar that's hosted by the MSD Solutions Lab at the National Safety Council and the Applied Ergonomics Society. I am Dr. Paige DeBello, Director of the MSD Solutions Lab at the National Safety Council. And like I said, we're really excited for this joint webinar today with AES. And we'll be discussing, as it shows on your screen, implementing technology in both large and small scale operations. And we're joined today by a really stellar group of panelists. And we encourage all of you in the audience today to use the Q&A function to ask your own questions to our panelists, and we'll get to them as time allows during the panel portion of the webinar. We'll also have a recording of this webinar available after if you ever would like to refer back to the content or share it within your networks. So we can go ahead and jump right in. So just a quick agenda slide here for us. So I'll be kicking us off as I'm doing now. And then we'll spend the bulk of our time today with the panelists, asking them questions about their own experiences selecting and piloting and using MSD prevention technologies. And then I'll pass it over to Eric to share a bit more about what's coming up for AES and to close us out. And so in case you are new to the MSD Solutions Lab and what we're all about, I thought I would provide a brief overview. The National Safety Council launched the MSD Solutions Lab, made possible by generous funding and support from Amazon over 4 years ago. And since then, we've been hyper-focused on this mission you see here, eliminating MSDs from workplaces worldwide so that people can spend time doing the things that they love with the people that they love. And what started as a bold vision to address MSDs, the most common workplace injuries, has grown into a really dynamic and research-driven movement. In the MSD Solutions Lab, we offer a wealth of free, evidence-based resources from white papers to infographics that are readily available on our website. We also have 2 robust grant programs that support and accelerate progress in eliminating MSDs. And we also host a large community of organizations committed to preventing and eliminating MSDs in their own workplaces through the MSD Pledge initiative. And so through the MSD Pledge, nearly 300 leading organizations representing over 3 million employees worldwide have made a shared commitment to reducing MSDs and advancing worker well-being in their own workplaces. And through the MSD Pledge, we ask organizations to commit to reducing MSD risks in their own organizations, increasing their organizational safety cultures, and increasing their efforts related to innovation and collaboration. So if you haven't already, I encourage you to join the MSD Pledge community. This commitment to the MSD Pledge opens the door to exclusive benefits, including pilot grant opportunities, virtual benchmarking events, expert office hours, a free MSD prevention maturity assessment that provides you with some tailored feedback, and a network of organizations that are united by the common goal of ending workplace MSDs. And so now we've gone over kind of that intro to who we are over here at the MSD Solutions Lab and NSC. Before we jump into the panel, I wanted to take a moment just to highlight a few common MSD prevention technologies and innovations that many of you may already be familiar with. These include things like exoskeletons, cobots and robots, wearable sensors, computer vision technology, and extended and augmented or virtual reality. All of these are designed to help reduce MSD risks, or can be designed to help reduce MSD risks, though each take kind of a different approach to doing so. And I won't really go into detailed definitions for us today on the call, but I encourage you to explore these innovations further if you have not before. And so you can learn more about these technologies by checking out some of our resources from the MSD Solutions Lab that we're sharing in the chat. And then also, of course, we're going to hear a lot more about these innovations in practice from our expert panel just here in a minute. And so now that we're acquainted with who we are at NSC, oriented ourselves to some MSD prevention tech, let's bring in our panelists so that we can jump right into our questions to hear about how they're using MSD prevention tech and innovations in practice. And so, like I mentioned, we have some predetermined questions for our panelists today. really just to get the conversation going. But we welcome your questions in the chat, and we'll get to those throughout this panel portion as we can. So panelists, you can all join us on camera if you'd like. We can go ahead and jump in. Alrighty, so welcome to Christine, Kaylee, Natalie, and Joey, and Eric, my co-host today. We appreciate all of you guys joining us and making some time to share more with our audience. And so first, we can just do kind of a little round of introductions for everyone. So Kaylee, if you want to go ahead and start us off.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kaylee Wilhite. I am a human factors and ergonomics specialist for HEB. If you haven't heard of HEB, we're a grocery retailer with locations in Texas and Mexico. We also have, manufacturing, warehousing, transportation, and e-commerce facilities, and that's the side of the business that I work on. So very excited to be here today and look forward to a good discussion. And I'll pass it over to Christine.
Thank you. Thank you, Kaylee. Hi, everyone. My name is Christine Dingo. I work for Cintas Corporation, and I am the ergonomics engineer at Cintas. If you guys have not seen these wonderful Cintas trucks, we provide different types of facility services from industrial laundering to the mats that you might see out at different businesses, fire extinguishers, you name it. And I'm part of the team that's in charge of the entire corporation. So we see a vast of different things when it comes to ergonomics, and I am also very excited to be able to share some items that Cintas has been doing for MSD prevention. I will hand it over to Joey.
Thank you, Christine. And Joey Wei here, Global Technical Program Manager for Google Cloud and Google Data Center. And yeah, that's me. And I came from Auburn, Alabama, War Eagle. So I'll pass to Eric.
War Eagle, Joey.
Afternoon, everyone. Eric Hassan. I'm the Director of Business Development for Caster Connection, and I'm the past president of the Applied Ergonomics Society, and currently I'm serving my last term on the board. Happy to be here. It's an exciting topic. Look forward to getting to it. Natalie, you're up.
All right, I will finish us off with introductions. My name is Natalie Gentry. Also, Joey, I did not know you came from Auburn. I also am an Auburn grad, so War Eagle. But I am the ergonomics program leader for GE Vernova's Gas Power Division, which is basically the division that makes products that go into a power plant, so a lot of heavy duty manufacturing settings. And my background is industrial and systems engineering.
Well, awesome. Thanks for those introductions, guys. And that makes three of us. I also went to Auburn, so lots of War Eagles all around here. It's exciting. And so we can dive right into some of our questions for our panelists today. And again, that Q&A function is open. And so Eric and I will be monitoring the Q&A. So if you have something that you want to throw in there while one of our panelists is speaking, that spurs an idea for you, just go ahead and drop that in there and we'll get to it as we can. But just to kick us off, to kind of get the ball rolling here, Natalie, I'll bring the first question to you, just to set the tone for understanding how tech might be even integrated into MSD prevention efforts and what companies might want to start thinking about if they're considering dabbling in this. So maybe from your perspective, Natalie, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that companies have when they first consider adopting technology for MSD prevention?
Yeah, some of the misconceptions that I've come across when making changes or updates to the Ergo program at Gas Power is when you try to infuse these new technologies into operational teams, there's a misunderstanding of what scope they provide of assistance to MSD prevention. So there's twofold misconceptions depending on what audience you talk to. A lot of like engineering teams will think that it's the end all be all, that they no longer need to put any more energy into ergonomics because this tool will do everything. And then if you talk to operations or operators, they are oftentimes afraid of technology because they think it's going to take their job. And so there's this misunderstanding of where we actually are at with technology. And so that's where like communication about new technologies coming into your business is really important, to make sure that you set the scope and set clarity, because that really helps with buy-in so that you're not later backtracking and having new conversations about um, the scope of work and the scope of participation that teams will have with your technology. That's what I found.
Yeah, thanks for that, Natalie. I agree. I think with what you're saying up top is, tech isn't a silver bullet necessarily. It's not going to solve all of our problems. It might be helpful. It can help us get a little bit closer to what we're trying to do. But people and operations, good workplace design, all of that kind of is foundational before we layer on tech. So that's really helpful. Thanks for sharing. And so, Joey, I'll come to you next to kind of get into some, real world examples of using MSD prevention tech. So, can you walk us through a real example where implementing MSD prevention tech significantly changed outcomes in your operations? And then maybe as kind of a follow on to that or integrated in, what really made it successful for you all?
Thank you, Paige. Great question. So yeah, I can share a real example. So we're currently partnered with one of the industrial lead, like ergonomics and human factor assessment tool, which one is fully or deeply embed with AI technology and machine learning, especially to make the motion capturing really easy through everybody's cell phone. Oh, of course, you need a camera pass to shoot a video, of course, at Google Data Center. But that changed a lot. So basically, I want to mention like probably 3 points, I think, from what I learned for implementation of this thing to the real industrial environment is the first one is scalability. So we all know like a Google Data Center and Google Cloud is serving a lot of customer over the world. And then ergonomics program is relatively small. So it means you have a variety of like a full variety of stakeholders internally. Don't even mention like external like customer, but internally like you have so many different stakeholders to fulfill the job. Then how to make the tool being accepted and by your stakeholder, because you cannot, as an ergonomist, no matter how superman you are or superwoman you are, like you cannot conduct every assessment by yourself. Today at here in the United States, the second day you go to Thailand, it's impossible. But the natural against the two is what if production manager has limited background in ergonomics or even safety, but really want to support you by using the tool, then how easy he or she can pick up the tool to support you in the right way, then that's what I say is scalability. So if it's easy to use, easy to pick up, no need to do a lot of like a manual calculation or something like a really complex chart. So that's already a win. The second thing is accuracy. So we all know like sometimes we're like everybody sitting here, not only ergonomist or human factor engineer, but also safety, we're fighting against soft tissue. So musculoskeletal disorder is not that so predictable as electric safety or like 85 or 95 decibel. That's a hard line, right? But then how to make the evaluation more accurate, because that's so important that maybe one number can lead to a huge decision to change the global SOP for handling a process or a machine or a tool. So what if the stakeholder question your decision and then it turns out like your decision is not accurate sufficiently? So that's gonna be a nightmare to any ergonomist. And the third one, I'm saying like using the new technology to make the tool customizable. So I believe like many of us sitting here is the top selection for ergonomics training, and how we can question ourselves like how many times we've been using the training slide deck nothing to do with what we're doing. Like for example, at Google Data Center, we're using some training slide deck, like using example from manufacturing or tractor company to try to show the 3 top hazard. So then similar to this assessment tool, if we can use the solution being customized and with the help of a big data and the machine learning, then the solution will be narrower and narrower and closer to what we're dealing with. Then when we pass that information to the stakeholder, it really gain their support. Rather than say, oh, this is nothing to do with us, let's move to another one. So I guess I'm sharing like 3 points here, but if we want to open this topic, it can be an endless one because everything is going better and better with the navigation from professionals. Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah,
Joey,
thanks
there's
for
a
that.
A
Oh, go
question
ahead,
from
Eric.
yeah, question from the audience, if you don't mind answering,
Sure.
from Jake Hoffman. Can you discuss if or how ergonomics and injury prevention is shifting towards individualized risk analysis and not just job task risk analysis?
So if I understand it right, is the differences or how us can help from individual analysis to no, from job analysis to individual analysis? Or
Correct. Correct.
okay. Well, such a good question. So I think like the training I received and also the practice, like the first thing we see, the foundation of ergo or injury analysis is about anthropometry. So I think we never really talk or focus on one person, but we're trying to be representative for the entire working population and to give, let me say this way straightly, like give a vague but also representative result regarding analysis. So I think I need to think twice about this question. I cannot really give a very suggestive answer at this moment.
Yeah, thanks for that, Joey. And I appreciate your answer to the previous question too. I know that we hear a lot from folks that we work with over at the National Safety Council that technologies a lot of times can uh, provide a level of almost like having more ergonomists or more certified folks able to do assessments. If we only have an N of one person who can go out and do assessments at hundreds, even thousands of sites, how can maybe technology help to reduce some of that burden if we can use things like computer vision to help kind of speed that process along, especially for folks who maybe aren't trained in some of these areas. So it can kind of help get over the learning curve, if you will, kind of jumping right into some of these things. So appreciate you touching on that. And Christine, I'll bring it over to the same question that we asked Joey. So can you walk us through kind of a real example where implementing MSD prevention tech really changed outcomes at Cintas, and what do you think made that successful?
Yeah, I mean, I like how Joey kind of went into the whole ergo assessment portion to kind of help gauge risk and assess that. And I think the whole individualizing, assessments to group assessments, what I love doing with so if I say partners, I'm referencing our employees because that's just our reference. We have so many locations and so many partners, so it's going to be hard to be everywhere all at once. Again, similar to what Joey said. So we try to make things really simple when it comes to implementing any type of technology. And I think just thinking about simple things and not talking about AI in general, but just simplifying a manual task with the introduction to an electrical component or a pneumatic component, because to some of our front line, that is new technology for them that they're just maybe not familiar with. And so something I do want to share is there was a solution that we had actually competed at the Applied Ergo Conference last year, and it was called the Power Transfer Cart. And this was specific to the clean room facility, clean room operations that we had at Cintas. And it's a smaller type of industrial laundering where there's not so much space. We're kind of constrained on space. And if we're familiar with any type of garment handling, we have these carts that have spring lifts in the inside. Well, unfortunately, for really wet garments, that spring doesn't really bring the cart up to its full potential of where it would help our partners out. So we had some partners that recognized this without any type of assessment. They just said, hey, this feels very uncomfortable. I'm very fatigued. And, sometimes an assessment is not needed if your employees are very well versed of something doesn't feel right. Let's take a look at it. That's the strongest, most empowering thing to have our employees have. And with that, they said, you know what, the spring lift cart's not working. Let's introduce an electrical component to it. So what they did was they found an electric, battery powered lift table. They incorporated that specific lift table and that electrical component. They put it together, and with a push of a button, that specific lift now goes up to where they want it, and they can just easily slide things in where they need to go. And so they've taken out that specific manual portion of having, or I would say the ergonomic risk of bending over multiple times, and it's just a slide in. And again, it's just a simple technology of just an electrical component that could easily be a game changer for the front line. And even so with pneumatics, changing something where it can be very manual on the upper body or even just, cutting, with scissors. We also had a solution from the ergo competition, I think 2 years ago, our Honduras location. They hand cut strips. So if you've seen people out with highlighter vests and all that, well, in our operations before, they used to hand cut every single strip. But then they decided this isn't right. This is very uncomfortable. And let's take a look at it. And they introduced compressed air. They introduced a pneumatic system where, with the push of a button, they have a cutter and it cuts it for them. No need to cut with scissors anymore. So I think it's just the creativity behind what technology is to some people. It's something very simple of just putting in, electrical components, pneumatic components to really be a game changer for the front line. And it's been very successful because we don't want technology be AI, because that's the biggest thing. We want our front line to say, if there's something simple that you can think of, let's try it out, because that is technology to you, and that's what you interpret technology to be. And so the simplest things, we always say simplicity is key to really build up to where we need to go for MSD prevention.
Yeah, thanks for that, Christine. I love the focusing in on the simple. And I think you also mentioned, getting the frontline workers' feedback and that participatory ergonomics kind of component as being really key, which also sounds like it speaks to some of the safety culture that you guys have over at Cintas too. So I appreciate you bringing in those concepts. And Christine, we'll stay with you for this next question, and we kind of teed ourselves up nicely, thinking about the frontline worker, the folks who are really actually being asked to interact with the technology day in and day out. And so, how do you balance the need for advanced technologies with the realities of frontline worker engagement and trust and usability? And what approaches have worked best to drive your employee buy-in at Cintas?
I think it's really key to be very transparent. And I think it was Natalie that stated it when it comes to the scope, being clear with the scope of the project, your goals, and really what are the roles and responsibilities that our frontline partners have within any type of change in a project, whether it's a process improvement project or just we're introducing a whole new system to them. And I think knowing at your company, if you're doing a specific like facility, for example, who are your key facilities that you can get direct, real feedback from to really say, hey, you know what, this is not going to work. And then say, all right, if it's not going to work, show me and tell me why. And let's work through it together, because they are the users. They're going to be using it. I'm not going to use it, but I want to know what resources I can give them to make sure that what we want to try and incorporate into their work system, their job tasks, will indeed be successful. Because if it's not successful for our front line and they have no feedback, or we won't get their buy-in, and it may not be a successful process as we would have thought. And I really like that it's, when it comes to those different types of things, once we get their buy-in and that feedback, you can really sell it to others of why it just works so well. Because people will be like, well, it's not going to work. And we're like, well, X, Y, and Z, this specific person said here, let's talk to them, let's have a group meeting and really just dish it out. And I like to say dish it out because you will have those non-believers. And how can you really reach to them to completely understand again the goal and the scope and really that role and responsibility? I think that's really key to be very transparent with when it comes to any type of introduction to something or any change in process.
Thanks a lot for that, Christine. And so, Kaylee, any other follow-ups to that question or approaches maybe that HEB has taken that have been helpful for you guys that you could share with the audience too, regarding kind of frontline worker feedback and buy-in?
Sure. Yeah. So totally agree with Christine. Usability, right, is going to be kind of the determining factor when it comes to, that buy-in aspect and also just sustainment. If they don't buy in and want to sustain whatever, we're proposing, then it's not going to work. If it's not easy to use or it just makes their work more difficult, then people are going to be a lot less willing to give something a chance. So, something that has worked for me in the past, specifically with like buy-in, is, I like to say, explain the why behind the what, right? So why are we doing this and what are we expecting the outcomes, right? With the transparency, and just, being open and honest, and just explaining that we are doing a trial or a test. This is not the end all be all. We want, information to fr flow freely between us. I also just let people know that they can be honest with me, and if something doesn't work for them, that's okay. They're not going to hurt my feelings, right? It's not about me. So, no feelings here. Just want to get the information and make it easier for you. So, just really focusing on building that trust, because that person ultimately is trialing something for you, right? So, just giving that space and empowerment for them, I think is key.
And to piggyback off your answer, Kaylee, I'm gonna pose this to you and the panel. Are you currently using any advanced ergo technology? And if you are, what type, motion capture, sort of any form of sensors that we mentioned at the beginning? And have you had success or not?
So specifically with, I guess, kind of technology, we have dabbled a bit with exoskeletons, in the warehousing operations. Um, I wouldn't say that has been like implemented at this point, right? Again, it goes back to that usability and also, as Joey mentioned earlier, that scalability. We have a lot of warehouses. Is outfitting everybody with an exoskeleton feasible? Probably not. So there is that component as well. For vision software, we are looking into that as well, right? And we will talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, anything else from the other panelists that they want to add?
Yeah, I can actually add something to that. I would say that I had experience dabbling in with some exoskeletons in the past, and um, I think when it came to the exoskeletons, I think these specific exoskeletons that I had piloted with some of the partners, it was very rigid, and you had to control the system itself to make it tighten to your body. And they had to wear it under their uniform, and it just got really hot for them. So after a while, some people just came to me and said, I would love to continue trying this, but it just doesn't work for what we're doing at the moment. And it makes sense, and I think it's always good to try it and get them familiar with, hey, there are different technologies out there, and if it doesn't work, we know that this specific one didn't work out. Does that mean that we're never going to go try other stuff? No, but at least at that point in time, it was a good learning lesson to say, let's just go back to the drawing board and figure out what else we can try.
Yeah, similarly, I will add on to that. We have also piloted exoskeletons, and they weren't super well received. I think that field of technology and research is on the brink of being extremely useful in industry, but it's not quite there yet. But something kind of like Joey mentioned earlier, we do use motion capture as our risk assessment tool to provide consistency and objectivity to our risk assessments. And that has been really helpful as we've rolled that off. That's all I've
Thanks for
got.
sharing it all. Yep. Well, I think that's helpful just to kind of level set on what folks actually are using. So appreciate that. All right. Let's see. I think, Christine, let's go back over to you. Let's see. Sorry. I think, Kaylee, we had another one for you here. So, thinking about organizations who might just be getting their feet wet with some of these things regarding integrating technology, what are maybe some low barrier technologies or strategies that you would recommend before moving into some of these more complex AI-driven solutions?
Sure. So again, like Christine mentioned, right? Got to meet people where they are. So, if your company or organization isn't as far along as you were hoping, right? You just got to ease into it. Maybe even being scrappy with the resources that you do have. If you're in a place that has only thought about ergonomics as being stretching and training on lifting, right? That's probably something we've all dealt with. Shifting that mindset might take a little bit longer, and that's okay, right? You're meeting people where they are. Um, but one thing that like has worked for me, right, is just getting one facility or one plant to buy into something simple, pallet lift tables, or maybe even different types of casters for carts, right? Something that they've never thought about. Then, in my opinion, you've started to introduce technology, right? Um, Another strategy that I would recommend, specifically kind of with the vision software systems, is to just try out the technology. You can get trials to these systems. It depends on the company, right? 2-week trial, maybe a month, but maybe you just pick a project that you already have going on and you use that trial access to get the data that you need or you want. You just want to try it out, present it to your stakeholders, get their reactions. Good way to see what works, what doesn't work. But yeah, highly recommend trying out a variety of assessment softwares, so you can kind of see, what works for your organization and specifically, and what could work to help drive that buy-in as well.
Great thoughts, Kaylee. Hey, Christine, are there any other strategies that you may want to share here that has worked well over at Cintas?
Yeah, I would actually I'm gonna piggyback off of Kaylee, and I think it's the frontline partners are experts, right? And sometimes they are going to use, like Kaylee said, the scraps that they might have at the facility because that's probably all they have. And guess what? Those are the types of materials that they are familiar with. And gosh, they're so creative. And I would say that some of the best technology solutions that our frontline partners at Cintas have made came from those scraps, reusable materials. They were being very sustainable. And to think about technology that can be sustainable from just getting something from out at the at the scrap that was going to get picked up for the garbage, it's very unique. And you can, and I'm not, there's so much technology out there already, but it's the simplest things and the simplest concepts that can really help, because once you start simple, you can add on to it and it can be more complex. And I think that just simple concepts, simple training will give simple solutions. And then as each location, or just the employees themselves, once we get to, like Kaylee said, to their level, we will build on that complexity together so that the simple will be complex. And boy, you're going to have some locations and some processes out there that you would have never known would have happened. And it all starts with just the simple things when it comes to that. And yeah, I'm very impressed with some of the people that have created things with just the scraps, I guess you could say. But the sustainability portion is what makes, I think, ergonomics in solutions just so great for MSD prevention. Because if they find a problem, they will solve it, and we are here to make it, less risky and be able to implement it throughout where it's needed.
Yeah, it's quite amazing what the imagination of some of the team members come up with. And I've even the past couple of Ergo Cups from Cintas, a couple that you showed me, like what they came up with based on what they have to deal work with is very impressive. So yes, the resourcefulness is quite amazing. And then there's also times when those scraps aren't going to work. And then when we're trying to roll out, that new tech or new strategy, because we have to try something new, maybe it didn't go as the way we wanted to, as it planned. So Joey, I'm going to bring this next one to you. Can you share a time when rolling out some form of new tech at Google did not go the way that you wanted it to? And the one or two most important lessons that you and your team learned from trying to implement that.
Well, thank you, Eric. You are asking the real expert of failure. So I'm so ready to answer this. I can give a very quick example, but I want to go in like a deep dive, like to see the root cause of like how those kind of new technology doesn't really align well, like in certain working field or like places. So here at Google Data Center, so as you know, like AI is the mainstream right now. So everything is going faster, more capacity, computer capacity, electricity, those kind of things. So the entire Google team, including Ergo and safety, we're chasing our customer because we need to fulfill their needs. Then Cobot is the obvious way to go. Like we cannot fully rely on the robotics because that's an even larger system engineering thing. So there's so many different teams developing their individual genius idea, but the robot cannot really feed all of them. Cobot is easier to control to fulfill the capacity to serve them. However, at data center, you may think like data center is all same, like with the same width of aisle, with the same area or same even the building code. That actually is not. Again, so we're chasing the customer. We're going to collect whatever building we have to transfer that into a data center. Then the failure happened, like the cobot is oversized. We cannot get people and the robot all going there together. Then what we're going to do, because the platform is getting heavier and heavier, then exoskeleton is another solution. So we're not only at the early piloting stage, but we already have that into some of our like a 3PDC data center being used. But the failure happened already. Cobot, we thought they're going to solve everything, which is not. Then let's deep dive into it. I want to see everyone sitting here, we're ergonomist or human factor engineer or EHS professional. We're the stakeholder for the first stakeholder for those innovation, like either like AI-driven assessment tool. I saw a question about why our AI tool doesn't work really well for our customer or clients. Then, or the tooling, we're the first liner to see, oh, this is really good in the ergo feature or injury prevention feature. But I think everyone sitting here, ergonomists, we're not the ultimate stakeholder. We're a bridge. Try to introduce something to the end user, the real stakeholder, who are logistic, production, and maybe supply chain, or the vendors like providing all those hardware to Google Data Center to make Google Data Center shine. So then, very simple example. So you are more than familiar than me, the knowledge lifting question, because that's a fundamental tool like every ergonomist is using. Okay, what we're looking for is a lifting index. And then the tool, like with AI tag, with very accurate motion capturing, can tell exactly the number for lifting index. Then we can translate that into how to see a report to tell the end user, this job performing this way with a given parameter is safe for your employee. That one is not safe. We can have a beautiful chart. But the question from the production, the lead of the entire region data center is, can you give me a number about frequency? If we don't have time to change any hardware or procedure at this moment because the customer is chasing me, give me a number of maximum handling per day I can protect my employee. So that's a very obvious misalignment between the development of an ergo tool or whatever the tooling company and to the end stakeholder. Then it's our job to see the challenge. I think the challenge and the opportunity are always like be pairing with each other, then how we can trust that. Here at Google and partner with my vendor, actually we already try to reverse use some calculation to give such a number. Again, we're dealing with soft tissue. Is not that accurate, but at least we gave a scientific way to give a certain level of accuracy or prediction. So that is the deeper, I think that's a deeper system issue from the beginning of the tool to the end user, like leading some of the failure. That's what I want to share. And I have one quick question. So when we finish the webinar, are we still able to answering the question? Because I try to type a quick answer while listen to others. I don't want to miss anything here, so I cannot do that. So
Now, I think we'll have a little bit of time to answer some of those questions at the end, right, Paige? I think we'll be
Yeah,
good.
we will. And if not, then we get a download of all these questions and we can make sure that folks get contacted with their follow-up. So all good there.
awesome.
And I'll just add to Joey, I think you kind of, I'm not sure if you see in the chat, we had a question from Bryce that kind of got into some of that data accuracy and measurement accuracy. I think you got at some of his question in your answer just there, but he was just wondering You mentioned that we have a higher need for accuracy in technology
Yeah.
solutions, and that in MSD, the exact maybe risk thresholds are not as known compared to other risks, like you had mentioned previously with decibel levels and those types
Uh-huh.
of things. And so, do you think it's a matter of it being more accurate in the measurement or changing what we define as a risk, which could be facilitated by the technology?
Actually, thank you, Bryce, for asking the question, and thank you, Paige, for that. So I was mentioning that because of that question. I think that's
Mm.
need a lot of like explanation and to share my thought. But thank you for giving me time. I can just do it really quick. So I don't really think the definition of a risk or hazard is outdated because as the production type or the needs is evolving itself, and the definition of the risk is evolving as well. So it's a pretty well catch up with what happened. But through technology, definitely the accuracy of prediction can be improved a lot. For example, so I think many of us, like the old school type, I'm an old school type, so we purely relying on knowledge lifting equation single task for lower back injury, which can only represent a highly repetitive traditional type of work. But the new tech already can help you with multitasking knowledge lifting equation by using a composite lifting index to predict the whole series of tasks, especially for Google data center here. So we're kind of traditional type of environment. Think the data center is nothing different so bad as a warehouse. People are still lifting things. Even a box is really valuable, a lot of chip in that, but to us is a dead load, a box. However, the assignment, the system design, like what is your next task, it never be a repetitive one because you never know like what is the next thing you need to fix or repair or maintain. That is not a highly repetitive. Then to use a better technology to precisely predict what next is going to happen and how far away from you a really good shape to an edge of getting stress and strain injury can really give the prediction to the stakeholder and even make it make it like a visualized by chart and picture rather than data and number. You're gonna really win the heart of production to say, oh, we need to take serious on this report and prediction. So I think if that answered the question.
No, I think you did. And Paige, we might have a topic for our next combined webinar. I
There you
mean,
go.
it's a huge subject, and
Yeah.
when you start getting into stakeholders and internal communication and how that can, as Joey explained, quickly get lost. Because everyone's got different goals, right? Ergo versus safety versus production, everything. I think that could be a great next topic. And to kind of lead into the next question, Natalie, I'm going to bring this to you. One thing that might be overwhelming or intimidating for companies getting started in their tech journey could be the amount of data, the amount of reports, all this information, all this great tech is just bringing in all this sort of data, and there's a tremendous amount. So how do you ensure that the data being generated by the tech is actionable and not just another, fancy chart?
Yeah, I actually think this continues the conversation of what Joey was saying of like, not just is it the amount of data, but the type of data, because the people who are making actionable changes to the work is operations. It's not necessarily always a safety or ergo person. And so the data needs to be meaningful to them. So it's like, I can have this ergo tool, which I'll talk about the motion capture tool we use, which gives you joint angles across your whole video, which is a ton of information. It gives you that for your neck, shoulders, back, knees, elbows, hands, and wrists, which is, like I said, a ton of information. And for our ergonomists, they love seeing that and doing deep dives. But for people who are not ergonomists, who I want to be utilizing this tool, that is very overwhelming for them. So what we do to make that less overwhelming is, first of all, the tool we use has very intuitive red, yellow, green thresholds. So you can look at that graph and say, this is, you don't need to know the joint angles. You don't really care about biomechanics, but you know that this portion of the video is where they're in those red postures or those red activities. So that's very straightforward, intuitive information. But also, taking that information and making it meaningful to those teams and actionable. So what does a back and extreme flexion mean? It means you need to reduce the reach of that load. Like, what does that mean in tangible reach reduction? Where should the person be interacting with that? So we have taken those postures and converted them to one design guideline. So if you see heavy back deviation, you know that you need to reduce horizontal reaches by this many inches. And we have zones of like no one should be reaching further than this many inches from their body based on anthropometric data, because that gives you a number to say, I know that yes, they are reaching more than 15 inches, or no, they are not. And then the other thing that we do with like translation of the data, that's what I call it, is because Ergo touches so many teams, you have to translate it into what's meaningful to other teams, but it's all the same information. I talked about like, okay, you see where all of the postures are in red and highly deviated at this portion of the task. That's actually just wasted time. It takes someone more time to work in a deviated posture. It takes them time to get into that posture, out of it, and they have to do it slower because they're in a vulnerable position. So not only is it an injury risk, it's actually a production impedance. Like you could actually reduce your tax time if you take this part of the task and make it less deviated in posture. So they may not care, or it may not be important. I won't say care, but it may not be important to another team's KPIs to have someone work in a less deviated posture, but it is important that they have a reduced cycle time. If you're looking at like a lean team, or there's tons of studies that prove that people who work in high risk ergo jobs have quality errors that not just happen more often, but happen more severely. So like translating it to what is important to the quality team and taking that information and making that easily translatable. So they don't have to do that translation themselves because other teams don't really know how to do that translation. That's the job of the ergonomist, is to help you understand how it matters to you and what your KPIs are.
No, great answer in making that information actionable for a multitude of different departments. So we're going to keep diving in on this topic. So, when you're working to get these implementations, this data actionable off the ground, making plans for the data usage, and then, subsequently you're going to have to make changes based on the tech intervention or the solution, which may be highly daunting. So, to help circumvent this, how would you recommend organizations integrate MSD prevention tech into existing safety systems, your training programs, and or your operational workflows without having it be so overwhelming for the teams, or even more importantly, I think that additional internal friction of you need to use this?
Yes, yeah. And I think this is actually the reverse osmosis of what I just said, of like going in and studying other teams and what they're already doing, the work they're already doing, the processes that already exist, and saying, how can I take the information they are already getting and make it important to ergo teams? How can I make it important to ergo decisions? Because at GE, we have a huge initiative of lean, working lean. And so our lean teams are doing a lot of like process studies and process observation, which fits right into ergo. So instead of coming to them and saying, you have to use this new tool that you have to learn and get everyone trained on, more so saying, we're going to take what you're already doing and the work you're already creating and make it fit into our program and make it a part of our ergo program so that everyone is synergized. No one is doing extra work, but we're all actually using each other's work to do more. And then the other part of that is like finding ergo risk earlier in the process, prevention through design. So that's working with design engineers, new product introduction to, again, translate ergo risk to say, this is actually, human performance is actually a constraint of the system you're trying to design for. So we make like gas products. So instead of saying this turbine itself is your system, it's actually this turbine and the person who maintains it. So the constraints of the human capability are part of the design constraints. And again, translating it because design engineers can work with design constraints. Like that's something that's meaningful to them. So that's the way that we try to infuse it. I'm all about doing more with less work because everyone is already super busy and basically max capacity. So taking the work that's already being done and translating it into meaningful information and the processes you need it to be meaningful for.
No, great recommendations. Christine, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, I mean, Natalie, that's amazing, and I feel like I'm Cintas is kind of on the same boat when it comes to really starting it from the back end of it because I think I've mentioned it before, but when it comes to ergonomic solutions and risk prevention, sometimes it doesn't start off as an ergonomics solution until you realize, oh wow, like you reduced so many ergonomic risk hazards that this is an incredible solution, but it was a quality engineering project. And so I think it's really understanding who within the company, is in charge of that design factors of the equipment that you're using, and there are so many pieces of equipment. Knowing who your subject matter experts are, and like Natalie said, being able to translate the ergo that fits their KPIs and that really flows within just the business itself, what the business goal is, it's going to be easy enough to integrate ergo because ergo is the process improvement, making the worker work at their optimal performance, less defects, just making it so that if the worker can do the job correctly and feel happy and comfortable, morale is good, the equipment's working properly, it's not going to fail, and it just works from the bottom up in my understanding. And I think that's what makes ergonomists so unique is because we have to work with so many people from the front line to our colleagues itself to presenting to senior VPs of the simplest things of what they need to really make the solution run. That's what makes us unique. And I think that if you build those relationships and understanding just how they work, and like you said, Natalie, translating it and being good at translating that information, it's really going to make the ergonomics program in general be successful when it comes to integrating just the simple solutions to the most complex solutions. Because then you have I guess, your key players to say, hey, this works. Let's go to have a wonderful training on it. They're going to be the people to help you out. And you'll get your go-to contacts to really make it successful for everyone. And I just think that's just really key. Starting early, just like you said, prevention through design. Sometimes that doesn't happen for many things because it just comes out of nowhere. But really just starting the process early and just getting it out there really quick to the right people. And I would say that we love ergo competitions. I don't know, we have, the applied ergonomics competition. I know many companies do ergonomics competitions, but it's so big here at Cintas that we have our executives that are just in it. They want to see what the front line does. What is the technology that's really going to help our business excel and really work to its best of its, abilities? And I think that's what's really key is exposing it to all levels. So the front line is really just saying, hey, key stakeholders, this is what we're doing. And we want to show it to you. And they're like, you know what? You're right. Let's get that going. And that's just simple is key so that we can add on complex later. But yeah, translation. I love it, Natalie. That was a good one.
Well, thank you both. Those were great recommendations, and those nuggets should help out our listening audience. And we got one more question, and I'm going to pose it to Kaylee before we wrap up. So, Kaylee, looking ahead, what trends or emerging technologies do you believe will most influence the future of ergonomics and MSD prevention in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, so this question, super exciting. I'm a big technology nerd, right? But I think it will be extremely interesting to see how things like eye tracking and virtual reality become more commonplace and kind of integrated with business, right? Um, I know that we specifically, focus on that MSD prevention aspect, but in my opinion, right, my human factors background, we tend to leave out the cognitive aspects of work. And there's a lot of research on, mental workload, situation awareness, but we don't really see those, cognitive components being integrated into work areas, specifically like manufacturing and warehousing, right? And it's just because those things are hard to measure. They're, kind of abstract. But I think it's an exciting time to be in human factors and ergonomics just because of the strides in the quality of technology, specifically with virtual reality, hand tracking, eye tracking built into those, systems, and actually those being available, you know, for more people at a price that, is more accessible than it used to be. So very excited about that stuff.
No, thank you for that. Joey, anything you'd like to add on top of that? Kaylee's comments?
Sure, definitely. I just want to give a quick echo to Kaylee. So basically, VR and 4D simulation, in my opinion, will take the lead in the future. And also a callback to Ashley and Christine as well. So as a my Ergo program is not only serving the production, but starting from supply chain, NPI process, logistic, and how to change the Ergo service from reactive to proactive, get an early stage into the design phase and then is combining with the human machine interaction design assistant, like a 4D rather than 3D. We want to learn not chop down each task, but we want to learn for the period of time or the entire process, what is the overall, like a composite risk regarding ergo and human factor. So that is something, at least for Google Data Center, we're going and we're going to enhance our effort to keep going there, that's direction.
Thanks for that, Joey. I was just going to jump in with maybe we have like one time for an audience question, and then we can go ahead and wrap up with a couple quick slides. But I see that Brian asked, and I thought that you guys might have some opinions on this. If we see that technology advancements might be creating new challenges, as the technology maybe is identifying more hazards or challenges than the ergonomists or safety professionals can really even address.
And can I just add something there? So
Yeah.
here at Google Data Center, especially for my like a DC Ergo program, I think the first thing I want to share is we never tell a data center technician how to do their job. So we learn from them. And there is a minor organization have a volunteer time, like we have a 20% role for Ergo champion and then 100% they are HOps and DC Ops technician. They teach me how the job should be completed because as ergonomists, we're so worried in losing the human dexterity and the creativity. So I think no matter how AI and the robotic system growing itself, it should be assistant for the human being because we create them. And that's my understanding. Similar from ergo, from human factor, from almost everything. So, yeah.
Thanks, Joey. Well, all right. I know we didn't get to all the questions in the chat. I saw that some were a little bit more specific, and so I copied those out for myself, and we'll make sure that we get in contact with you guys who had those questions over there. But now I think if we want to share slides again, we can wrap up with just a couple quick announcements and things coming up for both the National Safety Council and Applied Ergonomics Society. And really thanks to the panelists. I think this was so much helpful information, and I think, like Eric mentioned, we have a lot of great ideas for future ways that we can collaborate and have other webinars like this to share good information related to MSD prevention. So thanks so much, panelists.
Yeah, just to reiterate, Paige, thanks, Kaylee, Christine, Joey, Natalie. This was fantastic. Appreciate the time. I think the audience got a lot of good tidbits, and we've got some upcoming events. If everyone would like to learn even more than just this specific topic, so coming up, the next couple events sponsored by NSC. You have the virtual town hall, which is coming up a month from today. So you got a month to sign up, and then they have the safety summit in Baltimore from May 6th to May 8th. Great chance to learn a bunch of new stuff, network, and also if you're really a planner and looking out far ahead, their National Safety Congress is in, I think, Indianapolis in September. So a lot of good stuff coming up from National or the MSD Solutions Lab. And from the AES side, we have the Applied Ergonomics Conference coming up. So if you still want to come, you can save a bit of money if you sign up before the 28th. It's coming up March 9th to the 12th, I do believe. Two great keynote speakers. The famous Mark Bendon is speaking again. And then we also have Cassini Nazir. So that's in Arlington, Texas. Great place to network. As Christine mentioned, we've got the Ergo Cup competition to where you actually get to see these solutions actually in action. You get to see them, touch them, feeling, and have the actual stakeholders explain them to you. So it's a great time. And then if you do show up at the AEC, we have our town hall. So the Applied Ergonomics Society, our board puts on a town hall. We go over our strategic objectives, and most importantly, we want feedback from our membership on where we need to go with the society and what they want to hear and see. So if you've got time, come on down to Arlington, Texas. We'd love to have you. I know Paige would love to see everyone at the upcoming MSD Solutions Lab events. Thank everyone for attending the webinar. Thanks to all the panelists and everyone. Have a great week. Thanks.